Time to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go.
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Welcome back, everybody, to Star Wars Escape Pod. I'm your host, Josh, and we have Blake with us in the Escape Pod today to chat all about a retrospective look at 2020, just kind of recapping things that have come out, things we've had a good time chatting about right here on the podcast, and I'll look forward as well at things coming out, but mainly just this crazy year and all the stuff that 2020 has given us in the Star Wars fandom. And if you may have missed some stuff, you're going to hear about it right here on Star Wars Escape Pod. So let's get into it. Sit tight.
Another happy landing.
All right, we got Blake in the Escape Pod with us today to chat all about just what I was talking about there in the intro. 2020 in a recap. What is coming out? What have you missed? Just a look back. It's one last look before 2020's gone, and there's plenty of Star Wars stuff to chat about. I mean, arguably, we had a busier year this year with Star Wars content than we have in the last 5 or 6 years. So, I mean, let's get into it. Blake, you're right here with us in the Escape Pod. How you doing, man? Welcome back to the show.
Hey, man. Thanks for letting me be here tonight, and happy to join you. Happy to be your sidekick for the evening.
Oh, man, it's always a pleasure having you back. We're going to be chatting all about the stuff that's been coming out this past year, right down to the comic books and all that stuff. I'll skip over some of the minute things like some of the action figure releases and stuff like that. I can't keep track of all that kind of stuff, but I was able to find reference for a lot of the bigger things. So we got plenty.
Well, don't pass over all of them, because let's not forget there was a life-size, extremely high detailed.
Oh, that's true. That's true. We'll get to that.
Grogu, yeah, that's right. Don't forget that one.
Can't forget that one. I'm just adding it into the list here. Man, so it's been a crazy year. Gotta be honest. It's been weird. It's been real.
You say that, but I feel like I don't leave my house any more than I would any other year.
Yeah, well, we're a different kind of folk, all right. In the words of Sheldon Cooper, mankind has spent many thousands of years perfecting inside. I mean, why would we go outside, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. We're really putting it to the test this year. I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
And thankfully, we had lots and lots of Star Wars content to get us through the year, so we didn't have an excuse to leave anyway.
Yeah, no, actually, well, yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because I was going to say, despite all the garbage that I guess a lot of us have had to, sit through and read the news and all that stuff, like, it gets depressing, right?
Yeah.
But as a Star Wars fan, I feel like we had just as much, if not the same level of Star Wars hype that we have had in any other year. I mean, there's been a lot of cool stuff that we've been able to digest.
More content than any other year, which is crazy.
Yeah, which is crazy. Yeah,
I almost wonder if Disney created this pandemic so everyone would be forced to sit home and watch their material.
Oh yeah, that'll be the next conspiracy. This has all been for marketing Disney
That's
Plus.
Right.
Yeah, staying at home and watching Disney Plus. It's all been an expensive, elaborate
Talk about
plan.
timing.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, yeah, to be fair, we did miss out on a few things this year. I mean, this was going to be the next big Star Wars celebration, because of course this year being 2020, of course we celebrated Empire 40, and with that they also released the second A Certain Point of View book, which re-narrated the whole film from different characters chapter by chapter throughout the whole movie. And they did that when A New Hope came out. And you and I were actually down in Florida for that celebration, celebrating A New Hope for 40 years of episode 4. So this year would have been the next big 40th anniversary for episode 5. And it sucks that, of course, we couldn't celebrate that because, Empire remains to be many people's favorite Star Wars movie. So,
oh, absolutely. I wonder are they going to push it, or they... I wonder why they didn't just do a digital thing, but maybe they wanted to wait till they could do it in person.
I'm kind of surprised that they didn't do a big online digital event. Like I tuned into the DC universe, or the DC fandom, which was kind of DC's online convention that they did, and they announced like all their stuff like then at that point, and they didn't do the online Comic-Con one. But I feel like DC fandom honestly almost had more hype than the online Comic-Con did, and a lot of cool DC news came out in that fandom event, including the announcement of Zack Snyder's Justice League. Whether you like that or not, they did all of these cool like announcements, like big stuff, right? And I was like, oh, how cool would it be if like they did Celebration Online like that? But they didn't. Like, I think we got like a couple videos dropped on the YouTube channel, and then StarWars.com had a couple announcements that they made, and these things made their way onto other blogger websites and stuff like that, which then further elaborated. But it really wasn't anything special. Like they also had an online store, which I think was available for those couple weeks, and that was it. Like they basically just said next celebration is going to be either next year or the year after or something like that, and this year was basically just a dead celebration. So unfortunately. Didn't happen, and the fact that it's just been postponed, essentially it's just been canceled, because we would have had the next one anyways.
It makes me wonder then because we got massive announcements of new shows and films coming out. I bet they would have announced all of this stuff at Celebration.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, because Celebration was, I believe it was supposed to happen in the summer, but a lot of this stuff they saved for the Disney Investors Conference. So yeah, it does make me think what would have actually been announced if they announced anything more, because of course the Bad Batch announcement came out earlier this year.
Yep.
And so it makes me wonder if there was going to be any other things that they would have brought up, and then they were like, let's just save it for fall. That way we have a big slew of new things to... Yeah,
but it could be maybe stuff wasn't confirmed yet at that point either. They're still playing around with which ideas to go with.
Yeah. It's all about the money too, right? So like, they sometimes they announce these things timely with even just down to like the stock value and everything, right? Like they're like, oh, if we wait so long for an announcement like this, maybe it'll affect our stock prices in a better way if we save this announcement for the fall when we're expecting this and this to happen, which will cause it to drop or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. At least they can keep it coasting. So I don't know how it all works, but they decided to save it all for the investors conference, and I'm sure it benefits them greatly.
Yeah, it makes sense, because that's just gonna make stocks go up, right? They need a reason for people for the wealthy to stay invested with Disney through this whole thing.
Got to keep buying that stock.
Their parks have been down. I just thought of another conspiracy. Maybe Disney did make the virus because Star Wars Land wasn't doing very well. Nothing's covered up.
Galaxy's Edge isn't doing well, everybody. We got to make people stay home. Stay home and watch our movies.
That's right. It's like, man, I was so excited when they announced that, and then I just heard like review after review of like, don't bother. That's pretty sad.
Yeah, it sucks, because I guess the only normal months, I guess, on a global scale that we kind of had was January through mid-March, and that was it. Like we got like, and depending on where you are, if winter hit, I mean, you probably wouldn't be driving outside too much in January or whatever either.
No, just be locals.
Whatever. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. And for theme parks like that, it's like it's definitely mostly locals, and nobody's going on big vacations like in awkward times of the year like that. So they've definitely been hit hard in the theme parks and stuff like that. And actually that brings me on to my next bit of news. The Rise of the Resistance ride, which was the second expansion ride onto Galaxy's Edge, opened up in Disneyland. I think it was in January, I think. And this is the one that already existed in Florida. But that final California expansion was ready to go, and then COVID hit, and it's like I felt like nobody was able to properly enjoy it. And I did know people who went to Galaxy's Edge last year in Christmas, and I mean, I guess the news just didn't reach everybody that this ride wasn't open yet. But obviously, it's like, well, nobody's gonna wait a full year to go on vacation the next year, right? Just to use one ride. So
the grand opening, I was surprised, but I almost went for the grand opening, but then when I realized that it technically wasn't finished, I decided, I'm just gonna wait.
Well, I remember like you and I talked about that, going again, and it's like, well, let's just wait until everything's open and until the rush is gone, then we'll enjoy it.
Yeah, because it's not a simple trip unless you're local, right? So like we would have to fly halfway across like the continent to get there, essentially. Yeah,
exactly. So it's just, and it's no small amount of money to get there in the first place. I mean, it's okay, but it's like it for the average person, a couple $100 for flights and the hotel. It's not exactly the cheapest trip to go. It is if you're one person going with a buddy or two, but going as a small family or even as a couple that one person would have to pay for, it gets pricey. So it's like it makes sense, and especially around Christmas, like the prices are peaked a little bit for the hotels and stuff like that, and it's just like, for me, it's like I'm glad that we waited, because I feel like the next time we go, it's like, you know what, everything's going to be open. They've worked out the kinks. All the droids are going to be walking around and doing their thing. Whereas before, I think they were pulling them from the park because they had too many people in Galaxy's Edge. So there was no room. Okay, I'm surprised. Yeah, there was no room for these droids to just wander around by themselves. Yeah, so they actually pulled them from the park, and it's like, well, it just affects the experience at that point. So why bother? And then by the next time we go, there's going to be more lightsabers to choose from, and RGB color changing blades that we get the option with, just stuff like that, right? So so I'm looking forward to when things go back to normal.
They'll also have a few more rides, so that'd be cool.
It would for sure. Yeah, hopefully they decide to maybe even have something new. I know the Florida one has that option of staying in that crazy resort where it's also part of the Star Wars experience.
And it makes you honestly, that was probably the coolest part from what I read.
Yeah, exactly. Between the two parks, I honestly, sorry to everyone living in California listening right now, but I gotta say, like Florida, like Disney World, that's my place to go. Like I enjoyed my experience.
We don't want no land. We want the whole kingdom.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want just the land. We want the whole world, man. We want the whole Disney World, the whole experience. And I feel like it's just so much bigger. And because I'm not nostalgic about Disneyland, which I know a lot of people who prefer that one like it because of nostalgia reasons, I'm not like that with a theme park. It's like, for me, it's like bigger the better. So Florida's the place to go. And they're exclusively getting this Starship kind of experience where you go and stay in a hotel that looks like a part of the whole experience. Like your whole room and everything is like a inside of like the Ghost, right? You get like a proper bunk, like in like a ship kind of thing. And you look out the window and you see space and all that stuff. Yeah.
If they expanded that and they had like an Imperial room and they had a Rebel room, maybe a Jedi Temple room, which one would you go for? I feel like I already know because of the last one I said.
I would totally go for the Jedi Temple room, honestly. But
the thing is, have you actually read into the Jedi Temple rooms what they're like? It's just like a box that's a bed and a bare room. And like
it's like the biggest trick in the book.
Yeah, there's nothing in there because they're not allowed to own anything.
Can you imagine? It's like the market of that is like, this is the authentic Jedi experience. You go in there.
There's just a white box and a bed.
Like a single mattress on the floor. Oh man.
That's what it's like. If you've ever read the novels, that's what it is, because they can't own anything.
And the best part would be, it's like, oh, but where does my wife sleep? It's like, oh, thou shalt not love, and they slam the door. It's like, yeah, you're on your own, buddy.
Even adjoining room that auto locks at night, so you can't get through.
Yeah. Security cams making sure that you're in your own bedroom. Oh my goodness. Oh, this is
no hanky in this section.
Yeah, exactly. So
it was so funny, dude. I would so go for that.
Oh man, that would make a great like parody marketing video. You know,
that'll be all secretive. So like in the advertisement, they make it all mysterious, so you're not allowed to see what it is till you get there, and you've already paid for it.
Just see like the raw reaction of people's faces in the video.
Oh man.
Oh my goodness. All right. So we had, I want to get through the sad news here, but there's a lot of people who passed away this year that obviously had some big involvement with Star Wars. I mean, getting through some more of the notable ones. I mean, we had David Prowse, Jeremy Bulloch, Max von Sydow, and Wilford Brimley. If any of you saw Ewok Adventures, he played the character of Noah. And we had some people who worked for even the model shop and ILM and other people. We had Ron Cobb, Grant Imahara, Joe Sinnott, Juan Jimenez, Alan Harris, Andrew Jack, Malcolm Dixon, Kirby Morrow, and Jay Benedict, which all sadly passed away. Yes, and 3 of those names have passed away because of COVID-19. So big list this year. Obviously, like, you know, Jeremy Bulloch and David Prowse passing away within 2 weeks of each other, which is crazy. But, you know, it's just all these people. I mean, it's 40 years past Empire. It's like all these people are getting to that point in life. Yeah, and it just makes you wonder. It's like, when is James Earl Jones gonna, like, you know,
I mean, let's not even test that. I don't want to.
I mean, like, the guy is a gem, and we're getting Kenobi, and you know, we know that Hayden is coming back to play the role of Darth Vader, and I'm only assuming that James Earl Jones planning to do the voice for this character again. He did the character in Star Wars Rebels. He's done Vader in the prequels and the original trilogy. I mean, like, this guy is the voice of Darth Vader. Like, but it's so easy to well, it's not easy to think about, but it's like, it's just so easy to forget, I guess, that these people are the age that they are, you know?
Yeah, it's true. Pretty much everyone from the original trilogy is up there, right? Like, Anthony Daniels, even Harrison Ford's no spring chicken. So.
Oh yeah, and I mean, it's had me worried for the last 5 years. Selfishly, it's like, I want that next Indiana Jones movie, but I mean, the poor guy's been busy with the sequels and all this and that, and I know they when they bought Lucasfilm, when Disney bought Lucasfilm, they did say, we're gonna do another Indiana Jones movie. It's gonna be just one. We're gonna do that with Harrison Ford. It's gonna be the final chapter for Indiana Jones.
We'll see if they do it right this time, because in the last movie, you could tell that's what they tried to do. They tried to hand it off, but it just did not work.
Right, with Shia LaBeouf's character,
Shia LaBeouf, yeah. I think he was supposed to pick up the torch and do some more movies, but then the fan backlash of that movie just didn't go well.
Yeah, I really didn't. And, you know, and it's, I don't know, like, what's your opinion on Shia LaBeouf's character? Like, did you not like him, or did you like him?
I didn't have a problem with Shia LaBeouf in that movie, and I thought
it's more the plot, right? It's more the
not
plot of the
even
movie.
Entirely the plot. It's, to me, they didn't actually execute the movie correctly. So because, you know, I'm on board with the alien thing. Like, I'm not as concerned about that. To me, because that, I would have preferred something that's a little more in line with, like, the whole magical aspect of the other two
historical
movies.
And stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, this was historical too, with the Crystal Skull. So it's all real. That's all real thing. It's all from the Mind Temples. That was all legit. So that's actually part of the movie that I liked. The thing that I didn't like was they added all these really weird cartoony moments that just didn't belong in Indiana Jones. Like the dancing gophers, like Shia LaBeouf swinging with monkeys, and then the scene how it came out, where they're where Shia LaBeouf was fencing through the forest. That part I didn't like how it was executed. If it was more like an old school style, like it was in the original movies from the 80s, where Harrison Ford, for example, was like fighting on the tank, if it was more like that, that'd be fine. But it just kind of came off as too cartoony.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. It was more like the cinematography of like the shots. And you could tell
the reason why it came out that way is because they were trying to do CG, obviously, because that's what everything is these days. But they shot it in ways that the CG would work. Whereas I think a lot of that stuff would better if they just made a set and worked around the set, because a lot of that, the trying to hide the stuff that doesn't look real tends to look better in the end anyway. Look at Jaws, for example, right?
Right.
Yeah. So to me, it was more a lot of the smaller details just made it not feel like Indiana Jones.
That's fair. I would agree with that too. It's not exactly that I hate Shia LaBeouf's character either, or the actor. I mean, I think he's a great actor. I think he's an awesome. Too. Like the idea of this like rebellious greaser character from the 50s who Indy's forced to deal with actually it's a cool character that I actually think does fit into that universe. And I liked the whole dynamic between him and Indy, where he's always telling him to go back to school, and it just made so much that classic kind of father-son, highly educated guy who's a professor, and he's got this rebellious kid who doesn't want to follow in his footsteps, kind of thing. But there's this kind of fateful connection, regardless. I always liked that part of the film. The plot, I was like kind of more meh on. I don't hate it, but I definitely would have preferred something like what one of the video games did. I think they based the plot on the Staff of Kings or something. It was like Moses' staff or something like that,
which was really cool. I like that too. Obviously, us in the West have a bias towards like Christian artifacts because we have more of more understanding and a connection to that. Like you ask anybody, at least anyone I know, no one says their favorite is Temple of Doom.
No, for sure. The ones that do better have always been like the Christian artifact films.
Yeah, but even if they did one in like ancient China or something too, I think that'd be cool. Or like Japan.
Right. Yeah, it could be interesting for sure. Like there's a lot of potential, and they ended up going with the Mayan crystal skull thing, which I was like, okay, well. At the very end when you see the UFO take off, I was like, this doesn't really feel like Indiana Jones. But,
I could have done without the takeoff part. I agree with you.
I could have done without that too, but Anyway, so back to Star Wars stuff here. We had. I don't know if you'll have much to say on this, but we had the end of Resistance season 2 premiere in early 2020, between January and February, I think it was, that Resistance season 2 kind of finished up. Did you end up watching that show, or?
I watched a lot of it. I still have a few episodes left. To be honest, I got distracted watching other stuff. I do plan to finish it, and I did read a little bit on the ending here. So I see that the main characters finally reunited.
Right.
I'm pretty close. I think I've only got a handful of episodes left. Did you finish it?
I did, yeah. I watched them as they came out. And it was from beginning to end. Honestly, I can't be too harsh on this show because, obviously, I'm a massive Clone Wars fan. So taking a step down to Rebels, and I call it a step down because the age rating of the show had to take a hit because they premiered on Disney XD as opposed to Cartoon Network. So the violence took a massive hit when it came to that show. The animation, though, remained pretty smooth, really, really nice still. But I think the mass scale of the battles and everything, and a lot of the effects, I think it was a smaller budget. Just in general, I think Rebels never really lived up to Clone Wars for me. And then going to Resistance, being the third animated show, I was like, oh my goodness, come on, Dave, what are you doing, man?
But I would actually give Resistance a little bit of leeway, just because what they went for, to me, felt more like a show that I actually watched as a kid in the late 90s, early 2000s. So it had almost a little bit of a nostalgic kind of side to it for me. So there's certain parts that I really liked. Like it's probably the cartooniness. It's a lot more cartoony than the other shows. Like
it really embraced the George style slapstick humor.
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually blanking on the alien guy's name, but I enjoyed him immensely.
Yeah. Like, and the actor who plays that alien guy, man, what you're talking about the green guy, right?
Yeah, we gotta look up his name so people know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I totally forget his name now. Oh my goodness, it's been almost a solid year since I last saw the show, but he's played by an actor who plays those super nerdy characters all the time on like a show or film or something like that. I forget the guy's name, but he does a great job. Fantastic casting.
I'm just picturing like Moss now.
Yeah, almost like Moss.
Niku.
Yeah, almost like Maurice Moss. Niku, right? Yeah.
He was hands down my favorite character because, like, I don't know, he was so quirky. I just really enjoyed him. He felt like he was trying to go for like a Jar Jar, but he didn't come across quite as incompetent. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like he had a lot of charm to him for sure.
Yeah, like, and he still had some skills to him that were pretty, admirable, I guess. Like he was really good at his job.
He was actually. He was a very competent engineer.
Yeah, exactly. So he's voiced by Josh Brenner. That's his name. So Josh Brenner is he was in he played the only thing I can namely kind of he was.
I recognize him.
Yeah. So the only thing I can namely kind of say that I recognize him from is the internship, and he was also in an episode of the Big Bang Theory. He played Stewart's comic book store replacement at the cashier who didn't know how to do a return when Leonard brings his box of Wild West cards or whatever in to return it, and he's like, Stewart's out, and I didn't know how to do it. I don't do returns; they're hard. So that was him.
So basically he's got a bit of a trope character that he plays.
Yeah, he's always kind of that kind of character. So but he did a great job at that role. So anyway, so we got the ending to that series, and like I said, like I can't judge it too harshly. It was okay. It fits between it fits. Starting from season 1, it starts prior to Force Awakens, follows a unique cast, and kind of
a lot of really cool designs, I thought, into the Star Wars universe.
For sure. Yeah, it did. Some of the ships and everything. Yeah,
like actually the main ship that they're on, that's there's a perfect name for it, but it's actually like a big, huge docking space station for like refilling. It's like a refilling station.
Yeah,
I thought that was super cool.
Yeah, it was. I think it was called the Titan.
So the type of ship it is.
The Titan was I think it was some sort of. I think it was called Titan, or maybe it was called. Or sorry, the Colossus, not the Titan. It was called the Colossus.
That's it. That's it.
And the Colossus is like it's a refueling. It's kind of like a refueling station that was parked in the water, and it's not until like halfway through the show that you realize it's actually like a ship. And it actually comes out. I thought that was so
cool. That was a very Dave Filoni move, and I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, it was very well thought of. So there was some things in that show that I could get on board with quite a bit, but the general, I think, age target of the show is what took a hit for me. But obviously, I mean, I'm not 8, so I mean, I can't exactly say that I can't judge it too harshly here. But yeah.
Fair. If we have any 8-year-old fans, please reply on Twitter of what you thought about this show.
Please get your parents' permission to get a Twitter account and let us know at SWSK Podcast.
That's right. Please tell Josh a new one of how this was the greatest show ever created.
Yeah,
and it's
please.
Better than Clone Wars.
Please give me the rundown. So we had the Rise of Skywalker expanded edition novel come out this year, as well as a junior adaptation, which both elaborated on the film in a book format. I never actually read either of them myself, but
honestly, I've been trying to get through the novelizations of the films, and it is actually really hard to do, to be honest.
You're not a huge fan of them?
Well, the problem is because I already know the story pretty well, it's hard for me to stay invested when I could just go watch the movie and I kind of know what's going on. Like some of the filler details and stuff are nice, but I just found myself zoning out more than I do with new media.
Right. Yeah. No, it makes sense.
My favorite story to do with this was I was actually camping. I think it was this year. It might have been last year. And I was listening to the Last Jedi novelization. And I was on like chapter 2 or 3 and like not that far in. It was at night. And I was listening to it as I was falling asleep. And I was extra tired because we were camping. And I just like passed out immediately. And then I woke up at like maybe like 6 a.m. the next day, and I realized they've just been playing like the entire time, and I had absolutely no idea where I was in the book, and like I was like 30 chapters in.
Oh, yeah. It sounds like you reached Canto Bight and then passed out or something.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah, I never went back. I never listened to it again after that.
I haven't actually gotten through any of the new novelizations. I think, actually, come to think of it, I think the only novelization I've ever read or listened to is the unabridged Attack of the Clones. I think that's the only one that I've actually gone through.
Surprised it wasn't Phantom Menace, to be honest.
Yeah. I guess when I chose the audiobook, I think I was like, this was when I was like 13 or something like that. And, I had an Audible credit, and I guess Attack of the Clones was the first one on my mind. So, I got that one. But yeah, it's been a long time since I listened to it. But I don't remember hating it. And I remember many, many people really loving the Revenge of the Sith novelization. And to this day, I think with Disney, behind the movies and stuff like that, naturally they've kind of found a way to market the novelizations as something that even if you go see the films, like, oh, here's the extra story, and it's like this. So they've been labeling all the novelizations as the expanded edition.
Yeah.
And it's a brilliant marketeering scheme, that's for sure. But really and truly, when it comes to Star Wars, the films are the pillars of canon.
Yeah. So even if it contradicts, you're saying.
Well, and Disney's been extra careful not to have the novelization contradict the film. But for me, and I don't know if this happened or not, what if a novelization adds something that is then contradicted by the following movie? That is a more likely thing to happen. And it's not like we haven't seen it before. I mean, we've seen it we've seen it within the movies themselves, within the sequel trilogy. Yep. Yeah. And it's blaring stuff to look at, but yeah, it's even arguably, if you're a big advocate for reading novelizations, it's even more blaring if you're seeing the text on the page and reading it that way, and then seeing the next book and going, hey, this doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I mean, obviously they try to avoid it, but sometimes, like, once it's printed, it's printed. But yeah, for me, the films have always been the pillars of canon. The novelizations have always been this thing that kind of goes to the side, as far as like. That's a very George Lucas canon structure. It is, yeah. It's in line with that for sure. And it's not to say that any of the Star Wars books that have been coming out have been any less canon than the films are. But with the films, it's like those are the things that the whole franchise is based on, right? This whole franchise was started because of a movie. It's the way that things have been going consistently since 1977. Is like Star Wars is based on the episodes, right? So you look at those pillars. I don't even think twice about the novelizations of those movies at all when I think of Star Wars. Like, I think of the movies, and then I think of all these other books that go supporting those stories, and then I think of like the other things like the comics and and of course the live action and animated shows now, which I would say are in line perfectly with the films as far as canonicity goes.
They're top tier canon, including the animated shows.
And when Disney bought Lucasfilm, they did specify. They said we're branding the expanded universe as Star Wars Legends, and we are building off of the existing canonicity that George has left behind as the 6 Star Wars films and Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Like that's exactly what the blog article read when they announced this whole decision to make an expanded universe separate as far as Legends goes, and to kind of more or less clarify that line. Because let's face it, the expanded universe has always been something that George didn't really care about if he wanted to change stuff, right? He never looked at that as canon.
He just like if he had new stuff coming out, he would just go over it. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
A good example is when the prequels came out.
Oh yeah, for sure. So so I mean, it's not like anyone can. I mean, I know we all were pretty upset that we wouldn't be getting more continuity on those stories.
Yeah, because I will say I'm in the boat where I'm disappointed that we didn't get stories that had to do very much so with the original EU directly after Return of the Jedi, the original Thrawn story, Mara Jade, that sort of thing. I really liked those stories quite a lot. And I was looking at the news literally daily, actually, come to think of it. It was every day on my way to work. I would look up StarWarsNews.com and all the other leakers, and I'll be looking for constant news of spottings of who's being casted for Mara Jade for the new sequel trilogy. And they had some rumors, and I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but they didn't pan out.
Right. Yeah. This is going back, of course, to like 2012, I think, or 2013. And I think a lot of us were hoping that those Timothy Zahn books were
2014, I think, because the movie was 2015.
Yeah, and the Timothy Zahn books being Heir to the Empire and Dark Force Rising and The Last Command, like these 3 books were incredibly iconic and arguably were the reason why the expanded universe, aka Star Wars Legends, were such a big hit going forward, because a lot of the future post Return of the Jedi content, like all the books and stuff, they were based on that trilogy of books. And not only that, but I mean, Thrawn being such an iconic character was one of the few that Disney has brought back into canon. Yeah. In the new current stuff.
He fits so well, especially in that time zone, that it is something. He's a character that's very menacing, and he's not a Force user, so it doesn't really contradict with anything that's happened before.
Exactly. And even bringing him back into the canon, it's like, oh, well, let's flex his time period a little bit so he exists in this other period here, which is before episode 4. So they stuck him in Star Wars Rebels. They got Timothy Zahn to start writing new books based on that character. And that actually plugs right into the next bit of news here. So this year we had Thrawn Ascendancy book 1 of a new trilogy, and this one was called Chaos Rising. So previously, in the last couple of years, we had a new Thrawn trilogy, which kind of sidelined the Star Wars Rebels storyline. This trilogy of books is a prequel to that trilogy, which will take place. It's like in the past when Thrawn is actually still part of the Chiss Ascendancy, and it's his kind of rise to power on that planet and like in that unknown region space kind of thing. So it's the first of 3, and we got the first one this year. I haven't read it yet, but there's been a lot of people who've been pretty excited as far as kind of where the story's going. That's cool. And of course now
more now in this series, I will say there's at least one positive thing on top of the fact they got Timothy Zahn to do it. If it wasn't him, I wouldn't have really any hope with the storyline, but we're getting a lot more detail and a lot more of the character in this new canonized version of him. So there's that.
Yeah, for sure. And now it's very likely that we're going to have a live action version of this character show up, thanks to shows like The Mandalorian. And the plan with the Mandalorian. I mean, this is kind of a look forward thing that we'll bring up later. But with all the new shows announced, the live action Ahsoka show, which will be a limited run, plus Rangers of the New Republic, and then Mandalorian season 3 are all going to be intertwined together. And then we'll conclude in this cinematic conclusion event, which I can only think of would be where this character shows up, right? Which is like Thrawn.
It's too perfect. Though the only thing I would make me question that is he's technically already been this cinematic finale for the Rebels program. So I don't know if they would do it again. I would hope so, because he's the perfect character for it.
It wouldn't bother me at all. No, I would love to see him in live action. Yeah.
And working with Ahsoka, it makes even more sense because she's already after him anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, and now we're getting to that point where it's like this visualized dream of that original Heir to the Empire story of Thrawn and younger Luke and everything. We've got younger Luke now. Like this That's is all true. Coming together. It's like, I mean, I would freak out if we had a live action Star Wars movie called Heir to the Empire premiering on Disney Plus, like just a different story, not based on the book, but like based on what they've now done in the current canon. But at least shares the title. That would be insane. Like I would just lose my mind over that news. But I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. Did they ever hint at Thrawn being back? I'm trying to remember if Ahsoka.
Yeah, Ahsoka when she fights the magistrate or whatever, the Dave Filoni's samurai episode, she says, "Where's your master? Where's Thrawn?" And then it kind of cuts Thrawn off.
I wasn't sure if it was like hinting towards him, but she didn't actually say the name. So she did.
No, yeah, she straight up said it. And then on all the droids as well around the magistrate's place, they had Thrawn's logo on their chest. Of the Seventh Fleet or something. I forget the name of Thrawn's fleet. And now we've also got the Dark Troopers showing up, which is very, very Thrawn. The Dark Troopers did show up.
That wasn't a Thrawn thing.
And it's easy to forget because it actually took Twitter to kind of help remind me that the Dark Troopers had showed up before in Star Wars Rebels as like an animated version, and they looked only slightly different, but the majority of their look was actually the same. And so it's actually not the first time that we've seen the Dark Troopers, but in Rebels they were never referred to as Dark Troopers. They were referred to as sentry droids. So that was the only difference.
Because it's Gen 2 that is the suit.
Yeah, so in the EU, phase 1 was a droid, phase 2 and 3 I believe were suits, but phase 3 being like a Hulkbuster style suit. And in the show, the cloner guy, which I forget his name, said that these Dark Troopers were in the third phase. So they're on, and he said they're unmanned droid like things or whatever. So they've almost flipped it. This is now the phase 3 and it's a droid version, whereas in the EU a phase 3 was a human version and I think way bigger. So they've twisted the concept of the canon version of the Dark Trooper a little bit. Doesn't bother me at all though. I mean, it's really cool to have Dark Troopers anyways, like showing up.
That makes me wonder if they're gonna make phase 2 a suit then.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if they're gonna just reverse it and have phase 2 showing up. That's a good point. Like, makes me wonder if we're ever gonna see some of the older ones. But so we got there was some other new. I mean, Solo and The Rise of Skywalker came to Disney Plus this year. So I mean, this
contract ended.
Yeah, so this year marked the year that they made the full transition from Netflix, and all Star Wars movies can be found in one place. We also got a few more books. There was a Clone Wars book called Stories of Light and Dark, which was a collection of short stories that were sprinkled through the Clone Wars. There was a prequel to Queen's Shadow, I believe it was called, and this one is called Queen's Peril. Both books are written by E.K. Johnston and were based on Padme Amidala, which a lot of people were super excited for because, Padme being such a great character, it's hard to find stuff regarding her, and now there's 2 books, and hopefully we'll get a third one. But those 2 actually remain to be some of AJ's favorite Star Wars books of all time. So they're very, very well. Yeah, and he reads almost more Star Wars books than I think the only person that reads more Star Wars books than AJ that I know is Ian, and our friend from the UK. He's been on the show before. I think he's read every single Star Wars book in canon that has been released thus far.
I gotta give mad props to him because that is a huge amount of time. Like it's a lot.
And I've seen his collection, and it's like on video. And he's got every single. This is something I gave up on, was collecting all the hardcovers or all the Star Wars canon books.
Yeah, I remember, you and I were both doing that for 2 years.
I gave up on that. Yeah. It's just got too expensive, man. There's other things to collect, and besides, I just didn't find myself going back and reading the books. But yeah, he's got
them on the shelves.
Yeah, exactly. And Ian's got all the books, which is crazy. So I've always, mad props to Ian for being the guy to collect all that stuff. He's got the ultimate canon library. So we had those things. We also had a sequel to the Alphabet Squadron series called Shadowfall, which, I think Bryce would actually really like that series because the Alphabet Squadron series has been almost like in line with the X-Wing book. So it's like based on a bunch of pilots, from the rebellion or whatever.
I love that they're called Alphabet Squadron. I picture like toddlers with blocks.
Yeah. So the only reason why I haven't actually even bothered picking this, and I know people have been saying it's actually pretty good, but it's written by Alexander Freed, and I still have PTSD from reading the first Star Wars Battlefront book, which was so
me too.
hard to get through. I don't know.
It was so dry. And it was funny because that book and the Across the Stars book came out at roughly the same time. And the Battlefront book was advertised as this like hardcore, like battle, like gritty novel. And the Across the Stars was kind of like
younger readers.
It was advertised for like 13-year-olds, for like people who are maybe like they haven't had their Twilight love scene in a while.
Yeah.
And I loved every minute of the Across the Stars, and I could not stand at all the Battlefront book. I think I finished it, but it took me like 3 or 4 tries because I just could not stay engaged. And then take a break, and then forget everything that happened and have to start over. I'm in the exact same boat. I actually think I finished Battlefront before you did, but it was the same way for me. I was like, every time I put it down, I was like, oh, I got to pick up this book because I bought it, So, but yeah, Lost Stars was amazing. Just such a good book. And, it was in contrast to Battlefront. I think it was the star of the year that those two came out. It came out on top for sure. Anyone listening, don't underestimate the young adult and the younger reader books published by Disney Publishing, because there's some gems in there. Yeah, the adult authors try too hard to make their books for adults, and it kind of ruins them.
Yeah, and we're specifically talking about the Del Rey books, right? Yeah, and there's been some good ones as well, but I think in general, we had a conversation about this at one point. A lot of the new Star Wars books, aside from the Thrawn trilogies that we've been getting, and now the Alphabet Squadron series, there really hasn't been what we had before in the EU, where we had like 10 books in a series, and then the Legacy of the Jedi series and the Fate of the Jedi series, which was like 9 books or 8 books or whatever. Like you don't get that stuff anymore. It's all single book stories.
All those stories, the longer ones, I think they're putting all that in comics.
Yes. Yeah. So all the longer narratives, I think, have been designated for Marvel to kind of do comic book stories for, which, in one way it's like, okay, that's cool, but it's not like we didn't have comics before, which was doing the same thing from Dark Horse, right? But whatever. But anyway, so there's another book called Poe Dameron Freefall. This is for junior readers, which I highly doubt I'll ever get through that one, but that's out there. The Rise of Kylo Ren comic book series took a look at kind of the transition from Ben Solo to Kylo Ren, and give us a better idea as to like who Snoke was and how Snoke kind of got in his head and stuff. Is like that.
Is that out?
Yes, the whole trade paperback is out. So it was a mini comic book series. I think it was like 4, maybe 5 issues. And the trade paperback edition is on the shelves. And I've always been curious in picking that one up because, it's not that I hate the character. Yeah, I don't like Force Awakens.
I would actually say he's the best character in the sequel trilogy.
I would say so too. I think, and honestly, as much as I don't like The Last Jedi, as much as I don't like any of those movies, like The Last Jedi did Ben Solo a huge favor. As much as that movie kind of gets general flack, I really did like the narrative for him in that movie in particular. Like, he was the star of that movie for me.
Oh, for sure. I would argue Last Jedi as well.
Yeah. Like, he was the highlight of that film, 100%. And I think, like, this Rise of Kylo Ren comic, it almost, I think Last Jedi could have benefited if that comic book came out sooner. But
yeah, I could see that. Lucasfilm tends to be really overprotective with their storylines.
They don't want to fill in the gaps too quickly. Yeah,
they don't want to release anything that'll give anything away. They like the idea that when you see the movie, everything's new. You have no idea what's leading up to it. There's been no spoilers, like even the small stuff, which can be a hindrance because this might make people like certain parts about the film better if they have like a novel or comic book beforehand. Mm-hmm. So, and then when they do release stuff, they clamp the authors down so much that they don't really give you anything you're interested in anyway. So,
right.
yeah,
it is what it is. I mean, we got, well, let's see, let's take a look here. We got a new Darth Vader series, as well as a new Star Wars series set between 5 and 6. Did you ever read the Darth Vader or Star Wars comic series from Marvel that took place after Episode 4? Or the second Darth Vader? There's a second Darth Vader series that took place right after Episode 3.
I've only seen the first run, so the first volume or whatever they released. Okay. I've only read through that section.
Is that the one after Episode 3 or 4?
It's after 4.
Yeah, okay, so
that was 4.
That was the first one that they made, which was kind of a sideline story to the Star Wars series, which is ongoing for about 9 volumes or 12 volumes or whatever. It went way too long. I was reading
both of those when they came out.
Yeah, so I only made it halfway through the Star Wars series, but eventually they capped it off, and now this year they kicked off a new Star Wars and Darth Vader series, which now takes place after Episode 5. So they're trying to fill that gap in. But what were you saying, Dr. Afra?
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember her being introduced. I didn't get far enough for her to actually really do anything, but I remember she was very quickly becoming a very prominent character.
Yeah, and quickly becoming a fan favorite too. And I remember when we were down at Star Wars Celebration, because this character came out quite a while ago in that original run, but we ended up buying the 000 and BT. I think it's BT1, the Kotobuyoku statues from Celebration Orlando.
Yeah, I remember you and I were waiting in line for so long. We're like determined to get these, thinking they're going to be like the best, most valuable ones. And then there's that one R4 unit that was like really cheap, and it just like completely surpassed anything else by a lot.
It's so funny because Bryce got that one.
Yeah, he got that one.
When we got back from the convention that year, we all looked up this stuff online because, of course, this was all limited edition stuff, right? So we were like, oh, what's it worth already, right? And I think ours was like, it went from being like 60 US or whatever it was up to like $100, and it was the 2 droids in the 1 pack. And then Bryce got the R4 or R5 unit or whatever, the one that loses the bad motivator in Episode 4. And his was like $100 or $200. It was like double like the value of ours.
It just like exploded, and his only cost like $30 to purchase.
Yeah. His was like half the cost too, so it was so funny.
We should have got that one. And you think about it, it's like, of course, his original trilogy, but we fell for the advertising of the new like evil version of R2 and 3PO.
Yeah, we're like, oh, these are gonna be a huge hit. Like,
and now when everyone looks at our display cases, they're like, what the heck are those? And of course, everybody knows like the bad motivator droid.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone knows R5. Nobody knows what 000 is.
We played the fool.
Oh,
I'm
man. Well, it's like, he's such a good character though. Like, I mean, when you read the comics, you know the voice that I give Triple when I read the comics is the exact weirdly enough is the exact voice that they give Creepio in the All or Nots YouTube series for the voiceovers.
I can see that.
Yeah, it's that voice. That's the voice in my head when I read Triple talking about
skin,
useless organics and like torturing for fun and all that stuff. Yeah, he's a creepo, but you might as well call him Creepio because
it really is just the same idea. Like,
it's the same character. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. But so there was other comics that came out this year. The Dr. Aphra series is ongoing. And there was a new series that launched called Bounty Hunters, which was purely based around the scum and villainy around episode 5. And there was a series for younger comic readers called Star Wars Adventures, which I don't even know how that thing works. They do random stories here and there across the whole saga, but that pretty much sums up all the comic stuff. We had Clone Wars Season 7 launch on Disney Plus. And this was pretty nuts because, I mean, I remember we were in the same room when the news came through that the Clone Wars was being canceled. Yeah. And I don't remember. Do you remember my reaction at all? Like, I was just so
heartbroken. It was like
that's one way to put it. Yeah,
it was like it was Christmas morning and the tree started on fire, and you didn't just lose your gifts, but you lost the whole house
and all the nostalgic ornaments and everything. Yeah,
just everything. Like you went from Christmas morning getting the toy you always wanted to going to have to like live on the street.
Oh, it was devastating. Like that's the only word that I can think of when Clone Wars was canceled back in 2014 or whatever, or 2013, I guess it was. But and then of course I had a sour taste in my mouth when Rebels came out because I'm like, this is the show that replaced Clone Wars.
And I definitely noticed. Yeah, you were so bitter about everything that came out about that show. They put out a trailer and like we were maybe 15 seconds in, you're already complaining that the graphics were. And the renders were better in Clone Wars.
Yeah,
it looks so bad.
It looks so much more basic. Yeah.
Where's the grit?
I mean, like I was so nasty towards Rebels, but I mean now it's like, I mean, obviously it's geared to a slightly younger age group being on Disney Plus XD, but there's something, honestly, there is something irreplaceable about Clone Wars. Like there was so many fans petitioning to have this show back for years, and they actually did it. And it's like, it makes you think in retrospect, Disney, it's like, that was a better show. Like it always has been.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think even Dave Filoni knows that. Like there's more depth to it.
Yeah. And as well as to that, I mean, we had the announcement of the Bad Batch, which follows characters from the Clone Wars. They kept the same visual style. Recently when they launched the trailer, it's very obvious this show overlaps with Revenge of the Sith and Clone Wars, and continues Clone Wars as a narrative in a different show. Like this is just Clone Wars wrapped up in a new bow. Like it's a dream come true, right? Like it's a dream come true. And as a Clone Wars fan, this is everything I wanted. The only thing I could want more is the episodes we never got for Clone Wars finished. That's the only thing I would ever want to ask for. But I mean, Bad Batch is a pretty close second, and at least we got a finale for the Clone Wars.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's going to be exactly what they're going to do. I think Disney realized that they made a terrible mistake canceling Clone Wars, which is funny because when they bought Star Wars, they just saw the massive price tag that Clone Wars cost, and were like, nope, we could do that for way cheaper. And I think they like burned a lot of fan bridges when they did that. There's so many people, you included, like when you saw that happen, you realize like Disney's gonna take what you love and just like burn it to the ground.
Yeah. Well, it was not that far away from the same news that came out when they did announce publicly that they were rewriting episode 7 and discarding George's outline. This was public news that came out that they said, we're taking it in a different creative decision or direction.
Yeah.
And it was around the same year or whatever that this Clone Wars was canceled, and it was like, what are they doing? Like, yeah, and at this point I hadn't seen anything, not to mention Star Wars 1313, which still hasn't come out. It was canceled, and that was a game that many fans still want even today. And
it
like,
so good.
All these things, dude, like all these things happened at once, and Clone Wars was like the breaking straw, you know.
And then they just started pumping out stuff that just felt like cheap knockoffs of what we were looking forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
the first Star Wars Battlefront game, like, don't get me wrong, it had some cool features and stuff, and like as far as it being a Battlefront game to pick up after the other Battlefront games,
it was bad.
There wasn't a lot of depth to it.
It was bad.
That was
it was good graphics. It was good Star Wars graphics on a current game with no depth to it at all. There was no story. There was no campaign. Exactly it was online multiplayer only. At Battlefront 2, they fixed a lot of that stuff, but with the first one, it was like, this is the first Star Wars game that Disney released, you know, and it's like,
there's no story in a series that's about good story.
They weren't doing anything to get in anyone's good graces back then, and honestly, if you ask me, they're still trying to recover from that. And despite all these new announcements that they've made, they've started to repair things, but that's it. I mean, I'm still trying to get over the sequels and just how upset I was with those, but yeah.
Well, you know, people who dislike the prequels are just getting over it now, so give it 20 years.
Yeah, I don't even think they're getting over it. I think it's a lifelong thing, right? Like, I'm almost accepting the fate of like being obsessed with, you know, disliking those 3 movies, you know, the sequels, that is, for the rest of my life. Like, I want to like them, dude. Like, here's the thing, like, they're sequels, right? Like, they're sequels to the original Star Wars movies. Of course I want to like them. They're not giving me any reason to like them. That's the problem that I've got with those films. And you know, the problem that I have is like that they stepped away from George's vision and narrative completely. And decided to go their own direction. And this is all in line with that first kind of, let's cancel this, let's change this, let's change that. And it was just like, it was too much. And it's like, you know, and Rise of Skywalker was the final, the failure was complete, you know, to put it in the words of Darth Vader. It's like, you know, now their failure is complete. Boom, it's done. We've got the sequel trilogy the way that they wanted it to be, and that's it. Now we get to move on to some good stuff. So, I mean, now we've got things like The Mandalorian and you know, crazy to think, a live action Ahsoka show and all this and that. The Acolyte, High Republic era show, that's going to be sweet. Like, we're going to get a ton of good stuff.
To that. That's going to be super cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, in line with Disney Plus announcements, to move on from this subject, we had
series.
we had that too as well. I mean, and Hayden Christensen coming back. It's all good news. We had Mandalorian gallery content drop on Disney Plus this year as well, including a season 2 recap, special kind of behind the scenes look. Did you watch any of that stuff, or is that
I didn't know it existed till tonight when I decided to look up what happened this year.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So it's an awesome series. Like, they have the round tables talking with all the directors through the season 1 ones. And they showed, a lot about stagecraft and, you know, or the volume, I guess is what they call it. All that stuff. It was very, very cool. You get to hear a lot of Dave Filoni. You get to hear a lot of Jon Favreau. And then they just, on Christmas Day, they released a season 2 special add-on to that series, which covered season 2 as far as behind the scenes content. So that was a great show. And anyone looking to get more use out of their Disney Plus before WandaVision premieres on the Marvel end of things, you should watch Mandalorian Gallery if you've seen Mandalorian, because it was a fantastic look at a lot of the effort and you know, in, I guess, creativity that has gone into creating a live action Star Wars show in the line of, I guess, what George would have done is create new technology to do this stuff. And that's another thing. I don't want to keep going back to sequels, but that's another thing that makes this show so special, is that this is the first time that Disney has put out a Star Wars content that has had to make new technology to achieve something that hasn't been done before. And that was something that a lot of the previous Star Wars movies have stood on as far as a behind the scenes VFX pillar.
Yeah,
you know, the prequels did a lot as far as
the sequels. I'm sorry, the originals as well, right?
The originals. I mean, going back that far, we had like major improvements to how they did miniatures for film and stuff like that.
If you compare the original trilogy to any other film of that era, the amount of like the effects comparatively is insane.
There's no comparison. Yeah, it's like way better.
A New Hope came out the same year as the original Planet of the Apes movie, and if you watch those side by side, like your mind will just be blown.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's crazy how far it's come, for sure, and then taking those miniatures. I mean, you can go into the whole history of what ILM kind of did after Star Wars, but I mean, you take all that stuff all the way up to the 90s, where we had the special edition releases where they started tinkering around with CG. And then going into the Phantom Menace, you had the best of both worlds. You had this new evolving CG department. And then you had the perfection of miniature models and, just artists that make these giant, scaled miniatures, and seeing things like the Boonta Eve pod racing set, and it's just insane. Like the level of detail and scale was just it's not done anymore. Like people don't do that anymore.
True. Honestly, the only thing comparable would have been the original Lord of the Rings movies, because they did the same thing.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Lord of the Rings did the exact same thing as far as models go. In fact, some of their models were actually even bigger.
But massive.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, exact same kind of time period there, where you had this new kind of CG thing, but then you also had the miniature models, and then now with and then going forward from Phantom Menace, you had Revenge of the Sith, which really took environment stuff to the miniature scale, but it really perfected that CG kind of look, which it became more modern, which was what we have today, even better.
Well, you're even skipping over Attack of the Clones, which had the first 100% CG sequence, excluding actors, within a room and just green screen.
That's true, yeah, and that movie was also the first one to really push movies to switch to digital projectors, because it was the first movie ever in history to be done on completely digital film. Like it wasn't on reels or anything like that. It was completely shot digitally, edited digitally, produced, distributed digitally. And if a theater didn't have a digital projector, they couldn't play Star Wars. So, George changed the industry again in the theaters.
That's right. George single-handedly increased the cost of your movie ticket.
That's right. He did. And also THX, the sound system, that was also a Lucasfilm property, which advanced the quality of your theater's sound system. And that was something that I think Ben Burt came up with I think it was in the 90s or something like that, when he went to see the special editions in the theater. I believe it was special editions. Or maybe it was the original trilogy, but whatever the case, that technology was built as a service to improve the level of audio that you listened to, that you heard when you watched the movie in the theater. And to this day, that has, of course, been translated into like Dolby Atmos and, all the crazy audio things you get today. But yeah, that's right. All around. It's crazy, man. Like Star Wars literally has single-handedly changed the world. I mean, Pixar was a Lucasfilm company. Without Pixar, you wouldn't have half the Disney movies you have today. Like so many things. And
Clone Wars for TV pushed things, right? I mean, they were expensive, but
Clone Wars. And George always told Dave. He said to Dave consistently. He said when we do Clone Wars, he said film it as if it was for the big screen, like cinematically make this show as if it was going to be blown up on a screen that was the size of a building, kind of thing. And that's, you change, for a director, it's a different mindset, because then you're not filming a soap opera for television, you're filming a cinematic scaled thing. So you watch his involvement, like Dave's involvement of like Clone Wars until season 5 is like season 5 rolls around and it's like you get the Battle of Mandalore and stuff, and it's just insane. Like the level of
some of those shots are so
quality.
epic.
Oh yeah, it's crazy, and like you see his improvement as a director, just like, you know, grow with that show, and then getting translated into Rebels and now into live action with Mandalorian and stuff. He's come a long way, you know, and we all have good faith in Dave that he's going to bring a lot of good things to Star Wars going forward. But
to bring it around though, then if you compare that to the sequels, they didn't really push the envelope. No. I would say, like, it looks very pretty. You know, everyone did a good job. There's a huge budget. Maybe the one thing they did was they brought back a lot of the practical effects, but it's not really as much of a step forward as a step back to realize that.
Yeah, it was a step back as far as nostalgia.
It was I would say a good step back, realizing that it shouldn't be 100% CG. There's something that's lost, and I'm glad that they did that. Mm-hmm. But that's a much smaller step compared to everything else. It's realizing that, you know, things have gone too far.
Right.
And then The Mandalorian, as you're saying, took the next big leap, honestly, across the board for cinema and TV, bringing in this cool new like light stage setup. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's basically they take a set. Like if you think of a movie set, except instead of it being a room with props and stuff, it's a room that is entirely LED lights, and they project a image of the room they want the actor to be in onto the lights. So you can kind of think of it almost like you're like a TV that is an entire room, and it's all lined up to the camera. So as the camera moves, the room will move with the camera, so you can't tell that you're in a fake room.
Yeah, it's like a 360-degree screen that wraps around the set. So they have practical set elements in the middle of the room, and then the background, instead of being a green screen, it's like a big LED wall. And like as with new, you know, graphics processing and everything, they're able to, you know, change the layout of the environment. Like as you know, if they want to move a wall or a mountain or a ship or whatever, they're able to do that right there on the set, and they don't need to. Do that by shifting an entire massive practical building, and nor do they have no reference at all, which they're trying to figure it all out in post-production. So it's a really good, cool way to kind of give the actors like an on-set vibe as to what they're actually looking at, and then later on, that's actually what shows up.
Yeah, so it also allows all of the lighting from the set to be directly on the characters. So I think that's part of the reason why they made Mando's armor all shiny instead of painted, is because you get all the real lighting that he would be in the CG room, but because it's set up with these lights or these screens, you get realistic lighting off of the armor. So all those reflections, that was actually there. That's not added in CG. That was actually in the room.
Well, and of course, like, you know, this also affects in-canon events too. So like Beskar being this raw, shiny material, this is now obviously changed from the visual aesthetic of what Jango Fett's armor was, which was this kind of matte shine armor, which I believe it's also supposed to be Beskar, but it's got a different overall like kind of sheen to it, and it's not as reflective, which on Attack of the Clones, you know, of course, this is going back all the way to the beginning of this digital technology. They were filming on green and blue screen rooms, right? So you couldn't have a guy in metallic armor, because then it would just reflect all the green and the blue off back at the camera. It would be terrible. So, you know, I think that's also why they kind of gave it that kind of grayish kind of sheen to it without being reflective. Yeah, and then flash forward to today's version of Mandalorian reflective like metal armor, and you're actually able to get those real reflections that are coming from this stagecraft scene. So I guess we've talked about this quite a bit, but for any of you guys, just to recap, watch the Mandalorian Gallery. It's a great show on Disney Plus, and season 2 just dropped behind the scenes on Christmas Day. So we had that. We also had, did you ever watch Jedi Temple Challenge? It was the YouTube show. It was like a game show for kids.
I did not see that, no.
And Ahmed Best hosts the show.
Oh, that's awesome. Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah, Jar Jar Binks. So he plays a Jedi character who, to him, he says has some sort of relation to the cameo character that he plays in Attack of the Clones, who shows up in the bar that Zam Wesell gets her hand chopped off by Kenobi. So he runs a game show for kids where they have to compete in pairs against each other to complete different challenges, and then the last pair of kids gets I don't know, they win the game kind of thing. But yeah, I watched a couple episodes. I was like, man, if I was like 8 or 9 years old, I would love to do that thing. Like it looks so cool. But yeah, of course, at this age, like I would own that set. But yeah, like you just like the challenges are pretty, you know, they're for little people. But yeah, it's cool. I mean, having the idea of a Star Wars game show, I was like, this is awesome. Like if I was 8 or 9 years old, I'd be loving this. I'd be watching every week. So, you know, that was a thing. Sims 4, which seems to be a never-ending game of DLC.
That's so funny. Honestly, that game, when it came out, it was like the 90s.
Oh, Sims? Yeah. So Sims 4 now, they're only on the 4th version, but that's because they constantly add on. Okay, I took a look at the DLC packs on Steam for Sims 4. And the amount, like the game actually is not that expensive. There's like over 20 different DLCs, all $20 or more for this game, like just for Sims 4. And this game came out ages ago, and more recently they came out with a Star Wars DLC in regards to Galaxy's Edge or Batu. So they've transformed Sims 4 into partially a Star Wars game now at this point. So that came out this year in the fall or late summer. I forget which one it was. But yeah, I've never actually played lengthy amounts of The Sims. I used to play a lot of the mobile apps when I had an iPod, but
it's funny. Like a bunch of friends of mine, they would all play it because they liked like building houses and not so much actually playing the game. So it would like build their own custom homes and stuff, but like
place like the couches everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so with the Batu expansion, I think there's some sort of narrative for the Sims that you make decisions for them and stuff. Like it kind of turns into a bit of an RPG game, I guess. But yeah, I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. We had an expansion to the Old Republic, Onslaught: Echoes of Vengeance, another game that has been going forever. I couldn't really get into Old Republic. I've had a character or two. I could never get into the MMOs. I just don't have the patience for them. But
no, that's fair. I think that's most people. MMOs take a long time to play and a long time to beat. So you have to drop all. This is speaking from experience. You have to drop all other games, all other hobbies, everything if you want to play an MMO.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe even some friends. And
it's an investment for some people. Like you subscribe, you put money into props and vehicles or whatever else. It becomes a money pit sometimes too. But so speaking of things that you can buy, life-size Sideshow Collectibles version of The Child came out, Grogu in all his glory. I did buy one. Had it on pre-order since January, and it's amazing. Looks just like the real thing. It's actually made by the same company that makes the on-set prop, Legacy Effects. And they have a massive back order of orders. So, if you order today, you might not get it until summer next year kind of thing. Because I ordered mine.
That's really popular then, hey?
Yeah, it is. And I ordered mine like between January, February, and I got mine only like in November. So
yeah, and I remember you bought it, and then like 6 months later they upped the price.
Yeah, they did. They upped it like $15 US or $25 US or something like that. And it was because I think it was so popular that when they first launched it, I was like, "There's no way this is selling for like $350 or whatever." I was like, that even converting Canadian currency into US, I was like, that's still pretty cheap for a life-size replica made by the same company that makes this for the show. So I was like, second day it was available, I was like, purchased, like done. And I'm glad I did, because not only did it go up a little bit, but it is limited edition, so they're not going to be making them forever. One day they're just going to call it quits and be like, okay, that's it. We're going to finish what we have on order, and then we're not making any more. So I'm glad that I put my order in. So we also had Hasbro did decide to do a crowdfunded project for a big vintage style sized version for your action figures of the Razor Crest. Did you ever collect those smaller action figures back in the day, the 3 3/4 inches?
Not really. I got no, I think I always got the bigger ones, the 6-inch, and I only got a handful of them just for putting in like my cases of specific characters I wanted.
Right.
Like I got Thrawn. Yeah. I had actually planned on getting Darth Revan and then totally forgot about it, and now probably can't. And then I've gotten a few for gifts for people, but it's never been my thing to get like all the action figures. There's a lot. Yeah. There's so many.
The 6-inch ones are they're definitely action figures for older kids because they're expensive. They got the detail to them.
It's the detail.
They're basically they're cool. But the 3 3/4 inch has been the one that's been going the longest. And I actually did have some way back from when they launched Attack of the Clones lineup of stuff. And to this day, they're still not worth very much. In fact, I even saw some in our local toy collectible shop, and it was shocking how much they've even declined in value, even if they're like
in mint condition.
In mint condition, we're talking like plastic to the card, like welded, and it's still like it was selling for like $5 a pop. I was like, "You kidding me?" Like, but it's
honestly, it all comes down to production, right? So if they made a lot more of them, it's going to be a lot, value as much. Well, so you want something that's worth a lot of money? You should have bought a bunch of those Jar Jar Binks lollipops, where it's just where
I know
his tongue comes out of his mouth, and that's the lolly. So you suck on his tongue.
Right? Yeah. Exactly. You should have bought some of that stuff. It's crazy what people don't think something's going to go up value, and then it does because nobody values it originally.
Yeah,
and
that's
then,
exactly what it is.
And then everyone's trying to find it because nobody's got it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's rare.
It's like you can buy a Star Wars pizza box online from Pizza Hut way back when I think it was the prequels came out, or something. I think it was Phantom Menace. And Pizza Hut did a lineup called I think it was called Jabba the Hutt. If you look up Jabba the Hutt Pizza Hut box, you're able to find a pizza box with Jabba in the logo or something like that, or maybe it was like they also did the same thing for the episode 1 re-release, like in 3D, but there was an original lineup way back when, and I think I vaguely remember somebody was like asking money for like insane money for this pizza box, and I was like, what the heck, man?
That's
like
so
this
funny.
is a pizza box. But anyway.
Pizza the Hut.
Yeah, Pizza the Hut. It was like, oh man. So Star Wars Squadrons was the next game from Star Wars at EA, which good reviews. I'm still playing through it. I still plan to do a dedicated episode about the campaign and everything, but so far it's been awesome. Reed played through it. He loved it. Anyone who really liked the gameplay of the ships in Battlefront 2, you'd really love Star Wars Squadrons, and it's got a full campaign.
If you like the original games from the early 90s.
X-Wing, Rogue Squadron, X-Wing and TIE Fighter, those are all great examples. Yeah, that's a good example. Even Star Wars Starfighter, which was Phantom Menace era PlayStation 2 game. All those Star Wars Starship games go back quite far, and this was in line with all that stuff, but using modern technology. So you can, if you got a VR headset, you can look around your cockpit and play the game like that as well, which is honestly, super cool.
That's probably the coolest part is they made it VR friendly, so you can actually be in the ship. I was surprised they did that, and it blew me away. And honestly, I want my VR set just to do that one thing, because that's so cool.
It's awesome, dude. Yeah, it's really enhanced the level of appeal, I think, to that game.
Yeah, honestly, we're almost there, I think, as far as getting the Star Wars games we want, like full VR, high quality. Like we're seeing like piecemeal, like the Darth Vader series, and then
the Vader Immortal series 1 through 3. Yeah,
and then we got this X-Wing game now. But honestly, I think we're getting closer. I'm just waiting for that like complete Star Wars RPG all VR. That's what I want.
We're almost there.
I want KOTOR, but VR.
We're almost there. So the next game that came out, I mean, leave it up to Star Wars to push the boundaries of games, and this is taking it quite far from Battlefront. But we have the next Oculus exclusive Star Wars game, which is called Tales from a Galaxy's Edge. And this game took players in their headsets, completely VR game, to Batuu, where you live out a story of as a smuggler, sort of, or a droid repair technician aboard a ship that's transporting cargo, and the Red Key Raiders or something like that. I forget which gang it is. Is the gang that shows up in Force Awakens with the red eyes in their helmets? Those guys, they all show up. They raid the ship. You end up crashing on Batuu and make your way to the town, which is where you get to Cecil Slack's Cantina and all that stuff. It's very interesting. Like I did finish the game. I also plan to do a dedicated episode in 2021 talking about the story and stuff. But you basically have to go around. There is a story mode where you're kind of navigating the wilderness of Batuu, but in Black Spire Outpost itself, which is what Disneyland's Galaxy's Edge is based on, you go there and you can go to the cantina, you can go to the droid repair bay, and it's supposed to look exactly the same as it does in the park. We're very similar. And the characters that are normally there are there. And there's a lot of side quests and stuff like that. So there is this RPG-esque kind of level of gameplay to it. The expansiveness of the game is not that big. As soon as you kind of pass the intro of like navigating in this ship, there's no way to go back to that. Then you're stuck on Batuu and you're kind of in this circle of doing these side quests and sticking with the story. But once the story's finished, the only thing you have left to do is collect enough ingredients to make a drink at Cecil Slack's Cantina. And as soon as you drink that drink, there's a bonus adventure that kind of opens up, which is about a 35-minute experience, I would say, which actually is now the first piece of media in the High Republic era. And you then become this Jedi Padawan on Batuu in a time 200 years before the Phantom Menace. Yoda shows up. He's younger. There's a Jedi temple on Batuu, believe it or not. And you end up helping Yoda take out this like Sith relic, which is like kind of been unleashed in the basement of this Jedi temple, and it's causing chaos like in the temple and stuff. It's really cool. Like it's really, really well done. But it's getting to the point where I'm like, yeah, Star Wars RPGs, not far off. So you might get your wish.
I'm excited, man. Like, here's hoping.
Yeah. So speaking of the High Republic, a lot of the High Republic material that was supposed to come out this year got delayed to next year. But okay,
is this the comic?
This is everything. There's a slew of books, the comics, all the material that surrounded the High Republic title is now delayed to 2021 spring. The first book, I believe, does come out in January, but let me just look this up here. I mean, the announcement trailer's online, of course, but from the first book, you can read a couple excerpts from that novel.
High Republic was pushed back by global events to early 2021.
Yes, so January 2021 is when the first set of content comes out. They got two comic series, one from Marvel, one from IDW, which currently publishes the Star Wars Adventures comic series. And then they have a bunch of younger reader books. So they have, I think they have like one younger reader book, two junior novels, and then one or two adult novels that are coming. And between all that material, there's going to be this buildup of a story, which is trying to create a base for that time era. Because right now there's nothing. Like even in the EU, nothing. There's like nothing for 200 years before Phantom Menace. There's like it's okay. Pretty slim.
I'm glad they put an actual like time frame, because we have stuff from the KOTOR era, which is thousands of years, and then there's like a huge gap. I guess Tor fills in some of it, but not much. And then we get the prequel films. So I'm glad that it's going to be 200 years before, because I was curious when they were going to do it. Okay,
something new.
I gotta say something. So I'm a StarWars.com, looking at the Star Wars Best of 2020, and the image that they have for the High Republic has 2 characters with purple lightsabers, and I'm hoping that this image is not canon.
Let me take a look. Hold on. What do you Star Wars 2020? Okay, so let me just take a look at this here. Okay, I think I see what you're talking about here. You talking about the cover of where there's 6 Jedi on the front?
Yep, that's the one.
So there's 2. Yeah, I see the 2 people with purple lightsabers. Okay, you don't like them?
Well, Samuel Jackson, Mace Windu is supposed to have the only purple lightsaber.
I see where you're going with this. Yeah. I mean, I don't think he's too happy about it, but I mean,
there's a whole story behind it. Like, the reason why he had it is because he was the only Jedi who was deemed allowed to train in the fighting stance that was very close to the Sith.
Yeah. So that's no longer canon. That's always, I think, been an expanded universe thing. I mean, outside the movies, the real reason why he's got a purple lightsaber is because he asked for it. But I mean, going into like canon stuff, Jedi Fallen Order also kind of confirmed at a level that you can have almost any color lightsaber, including orange and yellow. I mean, with Clone Wars and Rebels and Rise of Skywalker, we've seen yellow a couple times now, including the Marvel comic books.
Yellow is also the Jedi Sentinels, which we saw in Clone Wars.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, but purple really, it is a harder one to kind of pick out. But obviously Samuel's not going to be too happy about it. But I mean, you know, he's still the only guy to have it in a movie. So you know, we got that. But
I gotta say, I don't like that. They should have stuck to the. I'm okay with every color except for purple. I really like that being a unique Mace Windu thing.
It does look like they kind of commonized it too much, which is a little weird. Because like I think they should have stuck with the blue and the greens, and then kept that design of having the crossguard thing, which is what they're going with as well. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't have a huge issue with it, but I see where you're coming from. Like, yeah, it does kind of remove a bit of uniqueness from Mace Windu. But what can you do, right? It's Disney.
Yeah, so I'm not happy. If they want to sell toys to kids and stuff, sure, but keep it out of my canon.
Right. Well, we did have a good piece of Star Wars canon this year, which was Mandalorian Season 2. You know, obviously a massive contribution to Star Wars canon. And like, just, I guess we did a full series of after shows for Season 2, so I don't want to kind of go on about each episode here, but just like, would like in a summarized kind of form, like, how did you like Season 2? And you know, you excited for a lot of the stuff coming forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed Season 2 quite a lot. I actually just finished going through Season 1 again, and I think we talked about this on the Mandalorian after show for the season finale. Yeah. And this is even just a thing just for me. I always prefer the first book or the first season. That's very common for me. And so again, I do prefer the first season of The Mandalorian, just because, as with all series, things tend to grow and get bigger. I liked a lot of the stuff they introduced. So I liked that they brought in Bo-Katan. I'm glad they brought in Ahsoka. I do know why they did it. I wasn't entirely happy with that episode, but it did.
It's going to slowly grow on us, I think.
Yeah, I could see that. It had some good things about it, and it introduced a lot of things that are going to come up going forward, maybe in the show, maybe in the next. One feeling I kind of got from that episode that is starting to actually annoy me more is it's starting to feel like they're using Season 2 of The Mandalorian as like a launching pad for new stuff, which they did with Arrow, and that really annoyed me to no end. Just felt like they kept creating these new characters to spin off on their own thing. I just felt like you lose. I don't want this to happen to Mandalorian. It hasn't yet, but it definitely happened in Arrow, and I don't want it to repeat. The show stopped being about itself and started being about everything else.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think like I remember us talking about it. I think when we had the Bo-Katan episode, and namely when Boba Fett showed up.
Yeah, I know we were all scared he would, take the helm of the show.
Yeah, and I think they actually managed it very well.
Agreed.
But then the question, I guess, going forward, the next question, I guess, for us to ponder with is, are these other shows going to be, is it going to be too much,
It could be. It's kind of funny
crazy.
Because
it's crazy to think. It's like, it's like we should be overjoyed that there's all this stuff, but like, it's almost like, I think I mentioned this to you, or maybe I mentioned it to Ben or somebody, but like my mind can only get excited about like 2 new Star Wars things at once that are big things, right? Anything beyond that, I'm like, I can't even think about it right now. Yeah, you get overwhelmed as a Star Wars fan. You're like, because you want to speculate and like do all these things, and it's like, man, there's like 11 shows coming our way. Yeah. Like that is honestly nuts. Crazy.
To quote Bilbo Baggins, I feel thin, like butter spread over too much bread.
Yeah. Well, this is very much in the opposite direction that they were taking Star Wars when they kind of canceled all the spin-offs.
Yeah, which is so ironic. It was like just before Mandalorian came out. So right after Rise of Skywalker, they officially announced it. They're taking a break because I thought there was too much Star Wars coming out, and
it's like Solo. It's like
fans couldn't keep up. They didn't like it. They liked having their space. And then Mandalorian does well. And then boom, there's 10 shows.
Yeah, man. That's a very Jar Jar way of explaining it. It's like we had all this stuff, and then boom, then we have more stuff. These are too much.
You should contact the voice actor for Jar Jar and get him to do part of your intro.
Well, everybody listening, we shared a video on the Twitter feed leading to a very special fan film called Binks: A Star Wars Story. Check it out. It's on YouTube. Give it a watch. Mr. Ahmed Best.
Yeah, it's on the channel Arctic Edge. Make sure it's the right one.
Yep, and Mr. Ahmed Best himself actually liked the tweet, so I'm assuming he watched the video. But that got us all very excited because Jar Jar fan films, we need more of them. So
this is a challenge to all your listeners. We want you to put together a Jar Jar Binks fan video, send them to the podcast, and we will rate them, and we will actually judge and put the best one.
Dude, we should do that every year, like a Jar Jar fan films competition. Like, who's the best Jar Jar movie? Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. if only Mr. Lucas himself knew. So we also had the Star Wars Lego Holiday Special drop on Disney Plus, and this is kind of the last big piece of news for 2020. I have not watched it yet, but I plan to do that in the next day or two, I guess, before the new year. And from just what I've heard, it's supposed to be pretty good, but very Lego style, funny. I always enjoyed the Star Wars Lego games. How many of those have you played?
I've played the original one and original trilogy era one. I never did play the prequels. I probably should.
That was the second one, the original trilogy one.
Yeah, well, because they released all the original trilogy in just one game, right? So I played that when it came out. Actually, I didn't even own the game. I got a demo with another game of the Star Wars. Yeah, and then I played it at friends' houses.
Gotcha.
And my cousin got it. And I don't know why. I just never did. It was, I don't know. I just never did get around to it. But I did buy the Lord of the Rings one when it came out. Right. So I beat that. We stayed up, pulled it all nighter, beat it on the first day.
Oh, okay.
And I've actually been trying to go back and getting around to go back and buy the original Lego Star Wars because they actually hold up super well. Just with their gameplay.
They're so and the cutscenes are pretty comical, right? And I don't know, they just do a really good job.
I actually think they're better than the Lord of the Rings game because they're a little more open worldy, I think. Well, it's like the quests in the Lord of the Rings game, the things they make you do, I didn't think was as good as the Star Wars game.
Interesting. I haven't played the Lord of the Rings one, so I don't know. But I have played the first Star Wars game, which was about the prequels. The second one, ironically enough, I didn't actually play the full length of that one. I have played it, but not the full length. And then Lego Star Wars 3, which was the Clone Wars, I bought that for 360, played through that. And that one was the first Lego game, I think, that introduced like a special split screen. So you could actually move away from the other player and it would separate the screen in half. Whereas before you were always kind of tethered to sharing the same screen space.
What's funny is I actually like the tethered screen space better.
I do too, because I do too, ironically enough, because
it gets confusing.
Yeah, it does. It like the line constantly turning around. So
the Lord of the Rings one's even worse because the camera like moves to like fit both of you and then it splits and it's just, oh man,
it's distracting.
It's awful. I'm trying to turn it off, but there's like no setting. It's really annoying, to be honest.
Oh, okay. In the newer games, you can turn it off. Games, you can turn it off. That's like in the Marvel one and the Avengers one, you can turn it off. But I guess they've made major improvements as the years go by, and now we got the announcement that we're gonna have. Of course, we had the Lego Star Wars The Complete Saga game, which took elements of the first and the second Lego Star Wars games. Excluding the third Clone Wars one, and actually Lego Star Wars 3 Clone Wars came out after Complete Saga did, but the Complete Saga did a good job at kind of expressing all the movies into a Lego game together. They ditched a lot of the individual movie kind of sub levels that they had in the trilogy games, which lengthened that game in general. But covering 6 movies, I guess they had to condense each one a bit. But now we're getting a Skywalker Saga game from Lego next year, and that's going to wrap up all 9 movies in one Lego game, which is pretty crazy. So
that'd be interesting. If you wanted to do a LAN party, but we all hang out and wrap that and then do a review, I would totally do that.
I mean, if we buy it on Steam, we could have a good time playing online multiplayer too. Because it would basically just be the same thing. But yeah, LAN party also sounds good. But yeah, I think it'll probably work that way with hopefully it's multiplayer. Because my current Lego game, I know I'm able to do split screen on my computer. Like someone can play on a controller and I can play on keyboard kind of thing. But we'll definitely have to figure something out when that game comes out, because those games are really good for groups for sure. So yeah, that's pretty much all the good news from 2020, aside from the crazy announcements, which there's a dedicated podcast episode for that. All the shows coming out in the future, that's actually not content that got released this year, but the announcement was worth mentioning anyways. But I mean, just looking back, I guess that's a lot of Star Wars, for 1 year. I guess as a fan, we can all just be very thankful, I guess, that we've had a lot of Star Wars to keep us entertained as the time has gone by. And, when I come to think of it, this show in general, was not made for COVID purposes, but looking back, we started it last year in August, and then going forward into this year, as of March, when we all kind of got sent home to work from home kind of thing, I guess that was only sort of a 6-7 month period. The majority of the show has so far been over this crazy crisis, right? And so, it's shifted a lot of the ways that I've even done recording and stuff to online and stuff like that, which now I actually prefer. It's actually much easier for everybody. So you don't need to commute to my place or whatever.
Yeah, it's pretty funny because I know we had a hard time getting Bryce to rejoin the show because he just wanted to go in person.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, ironically enough, for me, it's actually easier. And it's easier for everybody. And most podcasts actually do this. Most radio shows, it's a radio show. So it's you call in and you have your guests over the internet or whatever. So it's actually, ironically enough, we're doing it the way that most people do it. But it's changed a lot of things. And weirdly enough, even though it's kind of put a halt to a lot of things, it's actually increased the level of with the level of Star Wars content we've had this year. It's been fun to have an outlet to just sit down once every week or once every 2 weeks or whatever and just chat Star Wars with friends
true.
and stuff.
It's we're no longer in the same class at school or working with desks right behind each other. So we don't necessarily just tap each other on the shoulder and talk about the new Star Wars content as often as we once did. So it's cool to have the show to kind of rekindle that.
Yeah, exactly. And, as from us, I guess, just being able to do the recording and stuff like that, it's been a really fun year. Doing Mandalorian, we had the Clone Wars Talk series with Diego earlier this year, which was wrapped up with season 7. And a lot of other things here and there that we've done on the podcast. And I guess just hope that everyone listening has been entertained over the last year and looking forward to a good year going forward. Hopefully a better one. And there's lots to look forward to as far as Star Wars content goes. It's crazy to think we're getting 11 shows, but hopefully we'll still be doing this podcast by that time, and there's going to be so much going on to talk about. So anyway, did you have any last words there?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. Maybe stay tuned. There's going to be far too many review shows coming up, I'm sure. So, keep an eye on the chat. And I look forward to seeing everyone's Jar Jar Binks videos.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, buddy. I guess we'll catch you in the new year on Star Wars Escape Pod.
Yeah, sounds good. See you in the year.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to Star Wars Escape Pod this past year, 2020. It's been a crazy one, but this podcast hopefully has kept you entertained with Star Wars news, discussion, commentary, whatever it's been, being the commentary tracks, the Clone Wars talk, the after shows for Mandalorian. We had so much happening this past year, and you guys can all look forward to a lot more stuff coming your way. I mean, we have Star Wars Squadrons out, Tales from Galaxy's Edge, the Batuu VR game. Of course, the Rebels Talk series is still a work in progress, going through Rebels with Diego. That still needs to happen. We've had our Lightspeed project going on, which is the weekly news headlines in regards to Star Wars news. So keep an eye out for those 15-minute or less episodes. We also have an episode around the corner called Why Watch the Clone Wars. And going into 2021, no better way than to reevaluate our classic shows like the Clone Wars. And with Bad Batch around the corner and Mandalorian out, it's all the more relevant to do that. And there's going to be a podcast episode directed at anybody who hasn't seen that show, and it'll be kind of maybe a nice nudge in that direction to watching it if you haven't seen it before. There's also a plan to do a Mandalorian Season 2 recap discussion and a bunch of explained episodes, which will be filling you in on the stories of Darth Maul and the Darksaber, Bo-Katan, Thrawn, Boba Fett, Ahsoka Tano, etc. Guys, it's been an awesome year. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. May the Force be with you. And if you can, please share this show with a friend and drop us the 5 stars. We'll see you guys next time on Star Wars Escape Pod.